Well, following the tradition of that, I think we started in Berlin, in fact, talking about bridges and art. When we started to prepare this conference for 2020, we were thinking of having a figure or a name of a civil engineer that connects bridge design and art. And immediately we thought in José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez as probably the best representative in Spain of this relationship between art and bridges. For me, it's very touching to start this round table because he was my teacher of construction history and art, and I think he was one of the few teachers that knew how to ignite in me and in other students the importance of construction history and the transcendence of design and aesthetics in engineering. He also designed elegant and timeless bridges, so for us was a kind of role model as designer. I think it's important to continue disseminating his work and his ideas into the next generation of designers. David, many thanks for the organization of the session. David is his son, and he's nowadays the General Secretary of the FIB, one of the most important organizations in our world, in the sector. And thank you very much to Álvaro and César, and also Juan, to accompany us to this roundtable. Thank you very much. David.
Okay, thank you very much, Pepe. I just, a very brief introduction to say first thanks to all the organizers of this Congress that allows us to have this session, in particular to ACHE, that is the sister organization of the FIB at the Spanish level, at the national level. Also the COAM, the architects organization, to allow us to be here and to make freely this event. Most of all, I would like to thank Pepe, because really his push, his interest, his will to do things, and that we could be here today, it was the difference. You make the difference. We tried to do something bigger, an exhibition, something, but it was not possible at this time. But I think with this round table, we will remember that after 20 years, maybe what's left or what is there from the thinkings and what the works, and what do we have here today. So I would just say just a couple of things before we start. One is just to say that all the documents from the family archive from José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez are now in the Historical National Archive in Spain. So it is something important that we will have these documents for the future for people that would like to study them, and there's a lot of documents that will be there. And then I just want to, for anybody interested, there is a nice book. It's called Pensar la Ingeniería, Thinking Engineering, that it's an anthology of his writings in engineering, in art, many things, very many different things. You will see that he was a person that was really with a lot of facets, a lot of ideas. You will see that now. And there is, unfortunately, it's in Spanish. So for many of you in English, you will not be able to read it, but most of the things are there. Also, you will hear something about this. This is the introduction in the Academy of Beaux-Arts here in Madrid, ¿no? El pensamiento estético de los ingenieros, funcionalidad y belleza, ¿no? Aesthetic thinking of engineers, ¿no? Functionality and beauty. And last, his book about the Eugène Frissonnet, about pre-stressing. This is an incredible book that is not only an engineering book, but also a novel, very interesting about a very important engineer. It's a reprint that we are doing now, and there is a version in English, unfortunately out of print. And if we're looking for somebody that would really want to reprint it in English, I think it would be very, very important. We will do a roundtable, 3 persons. We are late, so we will have the questions at the end. And, first, Álvaro Serrano will talk about José Antonio Fernández and the bridges, and his design in bridges and footbridges. Then César Lanza will talk about his thinking and what is in this time since then. And then finally, Juan Moya prepared a text about his relationship with artists. We will... Okay, this is what I was telling you right now. And then I would like to introduce Álvaro Serrano Corral. He's a civil and structural engineer from the Technical University of Madrid, 2002. He's director of MC2, Estudio de Ingeniería, where he develops all manner of structural designs and construction procedures for both civil works and building structures. He received a special mention of the 2017 AAYE Award from FIB in the category Design and Construction. Álvaro also collaborates as adjunct professor with the Technical University of Madrid. Álvaro was a student on José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez' last History, Art and Aesthetics of Civil Engineering course in the Technical University of Madrid, and he began his professional career together with Julio Martínez Calzón, one of main José's fellows. So, please, Álvaro.
Thank you very much, David. It's for me a pleasure and also an honor to do this review of José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez works on bridges and also footbridges. Then let's begin, because when José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez finished his civil engineering studies in Madrid in the late 1950s, at that time, with few honorable exceptions, the panorama of bridge engineering in Spain, as stated himself, was dominated by a system of obvious things protected by common sense in an environment of resistance to creation. And the bridge, as a symbol of engineering and connection between people and therefore progress, it had become an absolutely utilitarian, routine element, and in many cases indifferent to people who tended to reject it as a reaction. At the end of the 1960s, the City of Madrid called a design and build competition for the construction of a bridge over the Plaza de Cuatro Caminos, to which the young José Antonio, along with his colleagues Julio Martínez Calzón and Alberto Corral, participated. They did not win the contest, probably because of the novelty of the proposal and also because the excellent bridge that Carlos Fernández Casado proposed. But the proposal already revealed a new way of understanding bridge design, and the team was effusively congratulated. On his second opportunity, a new bridge to connect Juan Bravo and Eduardo Dato streets over Paseo de la Castellana, the main street in Spain, the team led by José Antonio and who had joined the sculptor Eusebio Sempere won the tender. The Juan Bravo Bridge was a magnificent challenge, crossing the center of Madrid in an area whose urban landscape is extremely sensitive, at a relative low level and making the crossing of vehicles compatible with urban pedestrian use both above and below the bridge. And the proposed solution was extraordinary, as it has not been seen before, integrating the bridge into the city and its surroundings. An exemplary way and introducing a new way of looking at and designing bridges in Spain, especially those located in urban areas. I cannot say it outright, but it was probably the first bridge in Spain whose design, after many years, contained an explicitly justified and rigorous aesthetic study. An analysis of the work basing itself on drawings, geometric criteria, models, and generation of multitude of details for each one of the parts of the work. Nothing was conventional or arbitrary. Everything was designed individually. Thus, the pier cap are inspired by motifs of the Greek culture, and the railing of the bridge designed to generate a dynamic sensation of movement for the users. It can be said that this bridge changes the concept of ornamentation existing at that time, which, due to poor functionalist hostility, had given rise to a lack of interest and carelessness in details. José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez does not renounce to ornamentation, but renews it from a point of view that elevates and manifests the structural point of view, renouncing to everything that is useless, but with the utmost care for details, within the rigor of the classical culture. Technically, the project also represents a notable advance in Spain bridge engineering, representing the first modern composite bridge to be built in Spain, and including some novelties, such as the use of white concrete in a bridge, or the use of prestressed precast slab before connection to the steel girder, built with weathering steel, which was also the first time it was used in Spain. Beyond just proposing a transit infrastructure, the project designed an entire urban environment of the highest quality, with the permanent exhibition of sculptures by the best contemporary Spanish artists, with some pieces that were made specifically for this place, such as the sculpture by Eduardo Chillida, commonly called the Sirena Varada, the stranded mermaid. In my opinion, the Juan Bravo Bridge inaugurates in Spain a new way of designing urban or semi-urban bridges in which the viewer's gaze is completely nearby, as the bridges really become objects of the city landscape, similar to any other building or element in the city. With the same perspective, José Antonio designed his second built bridge, the Devil's Bridge in Martorell. In this case, the complexity is manifested by the place where it must be located, with great topographical and geological difficulties, but also with a great historical richness, being a few meters from another Devil's Bridge of Roman origin and medieval construction, with a triumphal arch at its entrance. The built bridge is a composite structure of prestressed concrete and weathering steel, with two large white concrete piers, which are like two monumental tetrapylons that formally link with the Roman tradition. The four parts of the tetrapylon are joined at the bottom to form a single support, leaving the piers configured with a special character, not prismatic or circular as usual. The bridge also inaugurates a set of bridges that we could call a sculpture bridge, with a deep formal analysis of the large concrete piers, very close to the character of an sculpture, although at the same time fully and harmonically combined with the structural, resistant and constructive aspects. This interest in treating the piers as sculptural elements and their connection with the desk was manifested in many other bridges built later and in multiple models and studies carried out for different projects. 10 years later, the Millennium Bridge in Tortosa was designed. This bridge over the Ebro River near its mouth with three spans, the main one with a span of 180 meters, conditioned by the hydraulics of the riverbed, and its piers are essential elements of the design composition. They are conceived with a clear sense of space, far from the usual conventional approach of prismatic or cylindrical piles and built with white concrete. Each one consists of a shaft with two cantilever arms on each side, which are part of the composite deck that is fixed to them. These two large sculptural piles also resemble the T of the city of Tortosa. José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez combines that this bridge should transcend the mere fact of a public work, designed its abutments as two twin buildings to house a museum about the Ebro River, although only one abutment was finally used. Besides this bridge was the longest span in the world for 4 years of a composite bridge with 180 meters. The next milestone in José Antonio's works is the Bridge of Centenary in Sevilla. This large-scale bridge was designed and built at the end of the 1990s in collaboration with Julio Martínez Calzón, Francisco Millanes, and Guillermo Montañón, and consists of a cable-stayed bridge with a main span of 265 meters and almost 50 meters above the river, with two large accesses viaduct totaling about 2 kilometers. Without neglecting the inevitable emblematic character that a structure of its dimensions was designed to acquire, the intervention in the outskirts of the city demanded a high aesthetic dignity, which also had to be maintained at a strict cost level and with a fast and efficient construction system. The solution came from the combined use of the steel and concrete in a large pylon and the systematic precasting of the deck. Thus, the solution of a composite structure of the pylon achieves a mutual and total understanding, not differentiating between the two materials, steel and concrete, which also facilitates their construction process. Memory and place are also two of the essential dimensions that come together in José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez bridge project, both being closely linked. His bridge dialogue with the place where they are located, not only with the sensible landscape, but also with the cultural landscape. In this case, the pylons, due to their shape and color, move us to the houses, churches, and patios courtyards in the city of Seville, in a subliminal way that contributes to intensifying the deeply personal character of the work. The deck, on the other hand, is made up of 4 prefabricated typical elements that allow a fast and systematic construction with a very controlled quality. The viaducts of Camas and Guadalquivir, 2 railway bridges, extends over a very flat and luminous landscape, which successively crosses farmlands, channels, roads, and particularly the Guadalquivir River, always at a very low height. It is a railway viaduct, so with high loads, which, in the absence of large obstacles to overcome, requires a moderate span and high deck, which usually leads to a crude, heavy, and unfortunate design. In this bridge, José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez radically breaks the preconceived engineering idea that associates slenderness with aesthetics quality, proposing a visual deck height of 4.5 meters for only 33 meters of span, just over 1/7. In this case, he conceptually deals with the problem of slenderness in a different way than usual. Instead of contemplating the relationship between the small span of each span with respect to the depth of the bridge, he considered that this should be valued as a unitary piece with respect to the wide Guadalquivir Valley, perceived as a whole, as a long ribbon extending over the landscape that is perceived between both abutments. The historical component, in this case, is achieved by seeking a presence very close to Greek art using a reference image of a power continuous bridge supported by a colonnade. The economy and constructability of this solution was achieved through the systematic use of prefabrication and the use of statically determined spans. The Arenal Bridge over the Guadalquivir River in Córdoba represents another important milestone in the introduction of typological and aesthetic structural innovation in composite bridges, as well as joining the line of sculptural bridges with large concrete piers and composite decks. On the aesthetic level, its essential novelty lies in the use of white concrete in the decks, calyces, and in the cladding of the bridge structural steel with thin sheets of copper, in order to get as close as possible the image of the historic buildings of the city of Córdoba, with its whitewashed facades and copper-colored roofs. The fourth bridge over the Urumea River in the city of San Sebastián was the winner of competition held in 1992. The bridge, despite being located in a monumental city with monumental bridges, is not presented as an ostentatious or gimmick work. On the contrary, its present is in a simple, serene, and elegant way, simply built to fulfill its mission of crossing a modest estuary in a beautiful city. All the simplicity of its design, almost devoid of any aesthetic intention, changes when the power of its technique is revealed, with a very slender deck, approximately 1/30, fixed in its abutment by means of elastic fixing cells. In this bridge, everything relies on precision and rigor in the choice of materials and attention to detail to constitute a work of total harmony and dignity. The Infante Don Enrique Bridge over the Douro River in Porto is the last great bridge designed by José Antonio, together with Francisco Millanes and his team in Ideam, Antonio Adao da Fonseca and his son Lorenzo, and that unfortunately did not get to see it finished due to his premature death in the first days of the year 2000. This place is magical for any bridge engineer. The magnificent city of Porto at the mouth of the Douro, surrounded by bridges that are historical milestones in the bridge engineering history. The bridge has no desire to enter into competition, neither with the wonderful skyline of the city, nor with the rest of the bridges that surround and accompany it. The solution is simple and neutral for the city, without renouncing to a technology of vanguard, but this technique remains discreetly in its place, without appearing ostentatiously. Porto did not need any more ornamental symbols. The bridge flies like a bird from Porto to Vilanova de Gaia, without leaning on the Douro riverbed, not even on its banks, with great cleanliness and sensitivity, expressing its functionality in the purest possible way. A singular and very slender arc, 1.5 meters deep for a span of 280, which naturally and harmoniously rests on the high rocky areas of the river slope, built by cantilevering from both banks. The bridge was initially designed with a stainless steel arc to minimize the maintenance cost, a circumstance that would be a worldwide milestone at that time. Finally, it was entirely built in concrete without losing its singular uniqueness. And finally, José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez always had the utmost consideration for pedestrians on his bridges, designing wide, beautiful and pleasant pedestrian accesses to pass and to stay. But the Padre Arrupe Footbridge, or Abandoibarra Footbridge, was his only work exclusively designed for pedestrians. Then, in a Footbridge conference, it seems a good culmination to review the work of José Antonio to have this work. The Padre Arrupe Footbridge is located in Bilbao, in an environment with a strong personality, surrounded by the Guggenheim Museum, the Salve Bridge, the University of Deusto, and the Deusto Bridge. An environment characterized by tradition, Deusto, and innovation, the Guggenheim, in which the footbridge has to be harmoniously integrated. Its form arises from a rigorous analysis of the functional needs of the paths that take place on its two banks, with two different levels connecting all entry or exit points with each other by means of ramps and stairs. The functionality defines the main structure by getting a skeleton, which groups all the passing factions with unused elements. The structure, with a marked three-dimensional and special character, moves between a lintel with triangular cells and an arc that flies between the two banks. The cross-section is made up of two steel lateral ribs. The ribs are cladded with wood, generating a channel through which people circulate. In this case, the footbridge was made of stainless steel. To conclude, the footbridge was inaugurated in March 28, 2003. 2 days later, on March 30, the Infante Don Enrique Bridge was also open to traffic. In these 3 days, the work of José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez was completed. José Antonio's writing work is extremely extensive. David has shown the book. However, at no time does he value his own work personally. In his entrance speech to the Academy of Fine Arts, he leaves this appraisal to future generations and expresses his only fear. Posterity is the only true judge. What I fear most is the indifference of colleagues who suspect me in future times. That is the only refutation I will accept. In those days of the year 2003, the personal work of José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez ended. Today, 20 years later, we can categorically affirm that his personality and his new way of seeing and designing bridges is still valid, and his influence on future generations, far from his further indifference, it is very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. Very nice presentation. Now we will go to the presentation, or more than presentation, the text that César Lanza has written. César Lanza is a civil engineer from the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid in 1978 and in computer science from the University of California in 1988. He also holds a degree in art and history from Universidad Complutense in 2018. He is the president of Tecnova Ingeniería y Sistemas, an independent firm located in Madrid that he founded in the year 1988. César was former student of José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez and joined the Society of Spanish Civil Engineers when the latter was the chairman of his professional body. César, please.
Thank you very much, David, for introduction, and even more for inviting me to participate in this concluding session of your Congress. Needless to say that I'm delighted to speak here and in praise of José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez. In order to adjust to the time given, I'll read my speech. And so I hope not incurring any rambling and keep myself in the order that has been established by the organization. As recalled by many who knew him well, José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez had a magnetic charisma. So say friends and colleagues who felt a close-knit affection towards him. Yet at the same time, his progressive spirit and determined attitude to transform the professional and cultural realms in Spain from the 70s to the late 90s made inevitable some controversies with the professional body he belonged to and presided over from 1974 to 1979, the Corps of Civil Engineers known in Spain as Ingenieros de Caminos, Canales y Puertos. Some of them, holding high office in industry or government during the 70s, were entrenched in a rather conservative position, looking with reluctance at the unstoppable modernization of Spanish society. Nevertheless, a deep political and economic change, now here as La Transición Democrática, came just after Francisco Franco passed away and the old regime collapsed, as Fernández Ordóñez had foreseen with his characteristic lucidity. Let me acknowledge first that I had not a direct relationship with Fernández Ordóñez's engineering endeavors. I was to him no more than a former student and someone who shared and supported most of his views concerning the need to open up our profession to the trends that were conforming a new social reality in Spain at a quick and vigorous speed. My recollections on him are thus much shallower than those of the people he worked with, his family, or close friends. Having said that, I would dare to affirm that he had a prismatic personality, using the metaphor in the sense which the Italian erudite Mario Pras coined to designate people who have several faces, it must able to confront diverse issues beyond the beaten track of conventional practice, edges, capacity to integrate and conclude views that may come from different sides, and vertices, pointing out to a variety of directions. To my mind, is the intellectual prism that Fernández Ordóñez was in his lifetime what explains the fact that a significant part of his legacy remains valid more than 2 decades later. One important ingredient of his personal stance and subsequent discourses regarding the responsibility of engineers was the demand to find a proper balance between function and beauty in every project having social visibility of relevance. His understanding of works with public presence called for a savvy as well as tempered balance between these two qualities of the Vitruvian credo, the utilitas, usefulness, and the venustas, beauty, notwithstanding, obviously, the firmitas, which is nothing less than a mandatory prerequisite for everything built. However, in my opinion, the thought of Fernández Ordóñez on beauty in the field of engineering is something that must be understood in the Renaissance Albertian sense, meaning more a congenitas, so to say, harmony and formal congruence, than a decorative or purely ornamental pursuit. This is not a trivial command when facing the conception, design, construction, and even maintenance of public works, at least considering what seems to be ordinary practice in the field. The position that he defended with an adamant perseverance was that aesthetic attributes, in the specific sense mentioned before, should be explicitly considered by those engineers responsible for designing and building bridges, dams, roads, railways, and any other works under their command. The Kunstwollen, the artistic intent or formal will that the renowned art historian Alois Riegel judged to be a necessary trait of any monument, should thus be present in the engineering of many public works, regardless of their scale or location, not only in the urban environment, but also across the territory, where landscape and nature act as companions, as binding companions every time the engineering action happens. In the year 1988, José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez was elected full member of the Spanish Royal Academy of Fine Arts. His inauguration speech as an academician was addressed to his fellow colleagues in that venerable institution in March 1990. The Academy was created under the auspices of King Felipe V, the first monarch of the Bourbon dynasty which currently reigns in our country. And it was chartered sometime later during the tenure of his eldest living son, Fernando VI, at the time of brief and in some respect disappointing enlightenment. The title of Fernández Ordóñez lecture was revealing: The Engineer's Aesthetic Thinking, Function and Beauty, el pensamiento estético de los ingenieros, funcionalidad y belleza. It was a discourse full of insight and sensitiveness that proved the broad merit and knowledge of the new elected member. Even today, it is an inspiring text that anyone in our profession of civil engineering should read and meditate upon. Let me to repeat here a short but nonetheless illuminating paragraph extracted from his speech. And he stated that the path of reason, where the engineer thrives, should never collide nor contradict the love and quest for beauty. El camino de la razón, en cuyo dominio trabaja el ingeniero, nunca debería entrar en colisión con el amor a la belleza. I will finish my allocution here by saying that for me, and I suppose for other people in this room too, remembering José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez is somewhat of a bittersweet engagement. For in some sense, I feel how valid are the key points of his thinking about what engineering should be and the way it's practiced be conducted. I will underscore quite a few terms he used to describe his work with Martínez Calzón in the third bridge over the river Urumea in San Sebastián, a privileged urban environment at the heart of the Spanish Basque Country. Serenity, serenidad, simplicity, sencillez, elegance, elegancia. Values not so widely seen in many of our public works of today. The former, in solid accordance with the rigorous and exact calculations and reasoning we engineers are proud to carry out. in any case of an undertaking, leading to that fertile integration of function and beauty that he advocated for. Allow me now to close my speech by borrowing some cherished words he used to devote to the memory of his late father. You're still there. Time has not erased your presence. Estás ahí. El tiempo no te ha borrado. The same perception, permeated perhaps by a melancholic feeling and a sense of loss, may apply today to the recognition of the outstanding engineer, scholar, and leader he was. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, César, for this emotive things. It's great. Okay, so we go now for the first presentation. Juan Moya is Valencian, born in 1928, shared a deep literary vocation with an intense professional life as a lawyer, a profession he practiced for more than 60 years. He participated in the drafting of the law of intellectual property, in the founding of ACE, Spanish Writers Association, and that of CEDRO, management entities of which he was president, and in that of ALADA, Defense of Copyright. He has advised numerous writers and artists such as Chillida, Sempere, and Genovés. For his defense of Spanish engineering, he was named Colegiado de Honor of the Colegio de Ingenieros de Caminos, Canales y Puertos, is the trustee of Spanish civil engineers. He's honored by his long relationship of advice and deep friendship with José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez. I will read his text. He's here with us, but he asked me to read his text in English, so I will read his text right now. Well, we can see him here with José Antonio and the wives. José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez's passion for the arts and artists was essential in him, a cardinal element in his versatile personality. But it was a critical, productive, creative passion. He needed to revise all the great commonplaces, the undisputed principles, and to pass on his findings. We experienced his vividly on the long visit of our two families to Greece in 1978, here in front of the Parthenon, where he confronted us with the immense reality of the Parthenon, the Caryatids, and the great keys to the Greek art, seducing that special public, mostly children, but already devoted. On a trip to Egypt, when in Saqqara, in front of some non-exempt columns, he made us enthusiastically sense the first pointed cross-sections in history. This passion had to be necessarily participative, and his natural recipients were the creators, artists, sculptors, painters. His prolific relationship with them and their support for him had already been clearly demonstrated in 1974, on the occasion of his election as a president of the Institution of Civil Engineers. The artist pays him a brilliant tribute at the Casino in Madrid, where the most outstanding artists of the time in Spain gathered: Antonio López, Eduardo Chillida, Eusebio Sempere, Lucio Muñoz, Juan Genovés, Amalia Avia, Martín Chirino, Pablo Serrano, Manuel Rivera, Andrés Alfaro, Enrique Gran, Carmen Lafont, Salvador Vitoria, María Moreno, and others. To such congregation of artists must be added poets such as Valente, Colinas, Lorenzo Gomis, or Clara Janés, who participated in his attraction to José Antonio. The poetic element in his whole spirit, in his essentially poetic intuition, lay in his whole spirit in his essential poetic intuition. On common holidays, he always carried and reread Shakespeare's and sonnets and selected books by Hölderlin, Leopardi, Borges, César Vallejo, San Juan de la Cruz, or even the living sonnets of Carlos Edmundo de Ory. José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez's influence on the artists he dealt with is admirable. I will restrain myself to an extreme and unavoidable case, that of Eduardo Chillida. I believe that his collaboration with Chillida reaches the level of co-authorship, not only because he physically produces his work, but also because his long conversations with him over so many years, he managed to transmit one of his basic ideas about artistic creation. Anecdotically, It is worth mentioning his idea of the convenience of applying to works of architecture and sculpture an imaginary machine, an universal vibrator, which would make everything superfluous, everything false, fall away. And also his idea about the effective perception of the right angle that took away the motion of the almost right angle, that of 88 to 96 degrees, to which Chillida alludes in his speech of admission to the Royal Academy of Fine Arts, which he wanted to confine to the enunciation of some essential questions about art, creation, existence, space, and time. That speech was revised and shaped between Eduardo and José Antonio in intense conversations in Menorca. But José Antonio's projection and influence on the artist came about massively through 4 essential activities: the open-air museum under the Juan Bravo Bridge in Madrid, the planning of the Avenida de la Ilustración, the activities he promoted from his position as president of the Institution of Civil Engineers, and his immense activity as president of the Royal Board of Trustees of the Prado Museum. In his 3 consecutive terms of office, from the reform and restructuring of the museum to its environmental renovation, such as the illumination of the paintings and the lighting of his room. In fact, it was José Antonio who was the first person to decide, focus, and carry out the great reform of the Prado Museum. In all these great fields and in his many interventions in the field of engineering, teaching, master classes, prizes, competitions, exhibitions, in he was curator and so many contributions of advice and motivation, José Antonio always stood out for his support for the author, the creator, the artist in his profession as a creator of beauty, harmony, and humanism. Thank you. Okay, I think we can have some time for questions. You can ask your questions in English or in Spanish. We will answer in English. So I will ask César, yes, César, Álvaro, and Pepe, would you come up to the stage? Is there any questions anywhere? No? Too shy?
To break the ice?
Yes. I can maybe break the ice. Then, maybe it's for the 3, no? Álvaro, okay, when José Antonio started his career, what fellow engineers said, what is well calculated is beautiful. And he tried to change that. And then, of course, came all this history that you have told. But through design and engineering, it became a moment of, let's say, decoration. Putting into the structures things that are not really essential for the structure. My question to you and to all of you is, where do we stand now? Are we back a little bit to the essentials, or?
It's a good question. Art, like engineering, I think that goes like a pendulum. When José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez began his career, all the work was absolutely lack of any kind of ornamentation, even of any kind of sensation of beauty. There were absolutely utility elements. Later, we have passed some years ago in an epoch in which the essential part of engineering, even of the architectural elements, was absolutely all ornamentation. And I think that the last mondial crisis has gone again to a more reasonable way of doing engineering, of doing architecture. Then I think that we are in a time, in an epoch in which I think that we are in a transition way to a more reasonable and more essential practice of engineering and architecture.
Well,
You're both designers.
Yeah. Well, we saw across this conference that in general, well, the tendency is to rationalize the designs, not lost in the beauty of the things, and working with the structural shapes to get also beauty. So I think we are in the good path, and José Antonio was an example of this kind of designing, timeless designing.
Let me ask you something, to you two guys. Is it possible to find any artistic will, as that quotation from Alois Riegel, in a bare structural design without not relying at all on any kind of funny things, for example, ornaments or whatever?
I think it's possible, but it has no interest. Then to do a work or a bridge or a footbridge only with a functional interest is possible. It's possible because we can say everything every day. Some time ago, people did it and later put on it some ornamentation, as we said before. Currently, I think that interest work, interest bridges, interest footbridges or buildings comes from the joy of the designer. The joy of the designer is also the joy of the user. Then buildings or bridges that are good to pass, to use it, is because the designer has enjoyed designing it.
Marcos wanted to ask a question.
Two questions, actually, I have. Well, the first one is, I mean, your father obviously, Jafo, influenced me a lot, as everybody studied in Madrid in his course of history of art. And if I appreciate and work with architects, it's, among other reasons, because of the teaching of your father. And I can see the jump from engineering to artists, in particular Eduardo and a few others. But I would like to ask you, or some of the people that know him better, how was his relationship with architects, which are kind of in between. So art is the stream of architecture, with beauty is the only purpose, with function coming completely secondary. And the second question is also related to one of the books that influenced me the most, which is his biography of Jean Freycinet, which is an amazing book, is that his relationship with France and with Freycinet in particular, how that influenced his career as well and his thoughts.
I think I have to answer these questions. He had a very good relations with architects. He could feel himself like an engineer architect. He collaborated, real collaboration, I mean, person-to-person collaboration in most of the work he did with architects, like Avenida Ilustración and many others. He worked with Higueras at the beginning also, so he had a lot of architect friends because they could speak the same language. In that sense, that they could bring history, art, and culture together in this reality. Today, I think engineering has changed a lot, and now today a lot of engineers can do that. But yes, we are in the School of Architects. It's good to say that sometimes he had even better relation with architects than with engineers, I would say. Maybe we can say that here. I don't know if Pepe, you would like to say something about that? No? Okay. And about the book on Freycinet, well,
and his relation with Freycinet in particular.
Yes, well, the relation in the new edition, we try to write a little bit of this history, comes because my grandfather was also a civil engineer and he was a friend of Freycinet. He brought the Freycinet patents to Spain in the beginning of the 40s, and also they went to visit Freycinet once a year to pay the royalties of the patents, and they have a relationship. And that's why when Freycinet died in 62, in 65, they all did a travel to talk to the companies and to the people and to who had the relation with Freycinet at that time. And that's why they could get so many good information to write this book. If they have waited 10 more years, the companies normally would have thrown away the information and this would have been lost. So it comes from a relationship in this direction. It's quite interesting because Freycinet founded FIP, Fédération Internationale des Pré-Contraints. That is the forerunner of the organization where I work now. And Francisco Fernández Conde, who was my grandfather, was also founder in the founding of this organization. They were the forerunners of pre-stressing at that time. No, Antonio.
I have the privilege of working with José Antonio on his last work, that is the Footbridge. It was a design and build competition, and the Portuguese good contractors were already taken. So I decided to go for a Spanish contractor. You know that, well, the Spanish people know that the Spanish contractors are very strong, so I could not face them without someone on my side. And I discovered about José Antonio when visiting Paris, an exhibition on the Pompidou Center on art and l'ingénieur. He was a co-organizer with a French, I don't recall his name. And when I saw his name, the name came to me immediately because his brother at that time was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Spain, who negotiated the access of Spain into the European Union. So, well, if he was organizing such an exhibition, for sure he was very sensitive to art and making beautiful bridges. So I invited him, and I was lucky also because the engineer that was working with him directly was Francisco Milanes, that I hope you'll be around in here. Oh, great to see you. So the three of us were involved on that outstanding bridge. Apologize for the lack of humility from my side, but it's a real daring bridge for sure. And he was really seeking perfection, the extreme, and with an enthusiasm that was difficult to fight. The final shape of the arch was decided in your house, I believe, where it was your brother, with an architect, I believe, where you had to do several models this size with the arch a bit more flattened or less flattened. So it was an artist's judgment. Together with him, we chose the bridge, and it was a great pity he didn't see the bridge to start. But when coming to Madrid and meeting him, I will say that I was also very lucky because he was a great, he loved good wine and good food, which is something that sometimes we forget is some of the best pleasures of life.
Thank you, Antonio. We have another question by José María Goicoechea.
Thank you. I would just like to share an idea and perhaps receive your comments on an aspect that I find about José Antonio. Well, José Antonio was my teacher. He was, we admired him, all the students, and later he was a friend also. I would like to stress that at that time, and Cesar had said something, he had very good ideas, but he was brave. He stood up against a large majority of the rest of civil engineers, who was a society very conservative, supporting Franco dictatorship. And he stood up against them. He thought he was very brave in supporting his ideas of engineering and art. He had a lot of objections against his bridge in Juan Bravo that Alvaro had, and all the students that were at that time his students, we supported him. We wrote letters to the papers. The mayor of Madrid was a civil engineer, and he was very much against the museum that he was making and the sculpture by Chillida. And José Antonio was brave enough to stand up for all this, and he succeeded in this work and in many others. and he succeeded eventually in becoming the president of the Institution of Civil Engineers. So I think it is an aspect that we should state. Be brave if you have good ideas, and you will succeed.
Yeah, thank you, Jose Maria. I believe that he really was an innovator in many respects. One of them was what mentioned Jose Maria some moments ago. He was able to confront climate was kind of suffocating in our profession in order to reaffirm an old regime. When the times of change were blowing around clearly, and he was able to understand, to tune, to hear the tune, and to put those new ideas in practice and bring them to the professional, a rather conservative profession as ours was at the time. But I'm going to tell you something which is quite simple and can give you an idea how we, or his students, saw and felt about his capability of changing things. The course of José Antonio Fernández Ordóñez that was given in the 4th year of the school, of our School of Engineering school, was the first, if not the only one course in the full studies where images were used to reinforce the teaching. Yeah, so probably this seems completely outlandish at the time, but it is true. No images were shown in the classes, in the classrooms of the School of Engineering. It's something that may sound ridiculous, but it was true. The blackboards were full of equations, were some sketches not very well designed, obviously, formulas, numbers, a lot of stuff like that, but no images at all. And this is important not only because the images or the visual thinking is a clear help in a pedagogical way, but also because it made us feel clearly that the engineering works belongs to the visual arts too. It's something that has to be seen, not only to be used. And thus is his personal stance on vindicating the beauty, the importance of beauty, not relying on ornament, obviously, or not regarding enough. He was very critical on Baroque, especially. He didn't like Baroque at all. He was a Renaissance man or an enlightened man, but not a Baroque man, no? And I think that those things, can you give you an idea of how brave and how innovator and how breaker was in some respects?
Thank you. We have time for one question, or maybe I will ask one more to Cesar, the last one. He was a teacher of history and art. He also helped to found the Juanelo Turriano Foundation and the History of Technology. How do you see, with the time up to now, if engineers have more involved into culture, into history, into all these things when they design or when their professional lives?
I think he planted the seeds for maybe not a too numerous group of people that feel active in the cultural realm. So we believe that engineering is something that has to go beyond the balance sheets of the companies or the utility, the social utility that we presume in bridges or whatever the kind of thing engineers design and build, but also that there is something that can be called a culture of engineering. And I believe, I myself, the first time that I hear about aesthetic of the engineering work was in his lips, was coming out of his lips. So never before had I heard something like aesthetic linked with the engineering work or the engineering endeavor. So I think this is very important, and it's not something that is simply anecdotal. I believe that after him, I believe that some people started to, I wouldn't say they took the torch after him, but were much more active in cultural arts, speaking publicly and so on, something that was very rare at that time.
Thank you very much. I think we can close now, Pepe. I would like just to thank Álvaro, César, and Juan for taking the time and taking the effort to think about this and coming here. We really thank you very much. And Pepe, of course, great, thank you.